Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Urban Update. I'm Byron Barnett. On the show today, the details on the new commuter rail station that broke ground earlier this week on Blue Hill Avenue in Mattapan. Also, the many activities to enjoy this summer on Boston Harbor, including the narrated harbor cruises that are the best and only ways to view the entire Tall Ships Regatta fleet as Sail Boston 2017 gets underway next weekend. But up first, not only is Uber dedicated to getting you to your destination, but it also claims that it's committed to keeping both passengers and drivers safe. Last November, Uber reached an agreement with Massachusetts lawmakers to provide better background checks when hiring drivers, and while the new screening process has helped remove sex offenders and most violent criminals from behind the wheel, hundreds of drivers claim they have been unfairly blocked from driving for the app due to decades-old cases or even a traffic violation. Now, here to share his concerns for this new screening process and how Uber is moving forward is the general manager for Uber New England, Tom Maguire. Also with him today is to discuss these background checks and how they can potentially create barriers to jobs is Michael Curry. He's the immediate past president of the NAACP Boston branch and currently on the board, the national board of the NAACP. Gentlemen, thank you for coming in. Welcome to Urban Update. Tom, if I could start with you, what are some of the concerns you have about this new screening process? Can you tell us about it a little bit?
Absolutely. Our concerns are numerous, but the concerns we have are the concerns we're hearing from the hundreds and now thousands of drivers that have spoken to us and have spoken to the Department of Public Utilities recently. Those concerns stem from a lot of different things, but the number one concern we hear is the indefinite look-back period for background screening. What that means is if a driver made a mistake many years ago, that mistake is always on their record and always being a part of their driving history with Uber. And so the challenge we have now is that drivers like Harold, that spoke at the Department of Public Utilities meeting 2 weeks ago, who had an OUI 45 years ago, is now held to that same standard now. And he said, and a number of other drivers said to us, that they're concerned that while they can't drive for Uber, they can't make that economic opportunity happen anymore for them, they can do other things that are not as flexible. Like the background check process doesn't prohibit them from being a nurse, from being a doctor, or even being a bus driver.
Mm-hmm. Now, are the drivers, aren't they able to appeal this? When their application is denied? That's
another concern of ours, and one of the many, that the current appeal process is not transparent. We've heard from hundreds of drivers, and the DPU heard from them 2 weeks ago saying, hey, I don't know how to appeal, and also my appeals have been denied. We heard from a driver at the hearing that said he needs the flexibility of a job like working with Uber to be able to care for his sick relative, and so he is unable to appeal for a conviction that happened 30 plus years ago as well.
Michael, what are your concerns about how this affects the people in the communities of color?
Yeah, we've been having this conversation for years, even predating sort of the evolution of Uber, which is really around workforce opportunities in communities of color. I always like to say we need to start connecting the dots in these policy conversations. One is we've talked about the failing schools. We've talked about the wealth gap that the Federal Reserve Bank pointed out. We've talked about the disparities in policing and over-policed communities and over-incarceration, mass incarceration in the wake of Michelle Alexander. But we're not connecting it to sound policy that creates pipelines into employment. And the reality is, if you're black and brown in this city, in Massachusetts, and across the country, you are likely facing barriers to employment. Uber, Lyft, ride sharing has presented a new flexible option for people to work. And we need to make sure that imperfect people, black, white, or other, have access to those jobs.
Now, specifically, what would you want changed to help drivers who've lost access to work?
Well, I think the folks from Uber have, and others, ACLU and other groups, Greater Boston Legal Services, have pointed out in great detail what doesn't work about these regulations, the unlimited look back, the not having the flexibility to look at individual circumstances, the sweeping nature of this regulation. It really punishes people who may have made a mistake a long time ago, or a generalization around if you've committed a crime, then you should not be driving one of these vehicles. And one example that was pointed out is homeless people who may urinate outside, and the impact that that would have if they're added to a sexual offender registration. There are many examples, domestic violence issues, that you will be barred from driving for Uber. I get it. We all understand it, that we want to make sure that people, when they get in the cars, are protected. But this is not the right way to do it. It's not smart on trying to prevent an incident from occurring.
Now, Tom, I guess 100 drivers testified at a public hearing back in May. What do you think will be the outcome of that?
We're hopeful that the governor hears them. So hundreds of drivers stood up and spoke, but hundreds also waited all day just to listen as well. And we're hopeful that the governor starts listening to those drivers, start listening to their requests and hearing their individual stories. There are drivers that are impacted by the indefinite look-back period. There are drivers that are impacted by this nuance called continuance without finding, meaning that while they have not pled guilty, that is treated as a conviction, and that conviction is treated as a disqualifying offense for them. And that's very rare and only used really in ride sharing, from my understanding. And the other part is the appeals process we also mentioned. There has to be a way for individuals to appeal to the Department of Public Utilities and say, hey, this happened 45 years ago. Let's talk about it, and let's showcase that my record has not shown anything in those 45 years. And that has to be transparent for people. And we're hopeful that they can go back and make these changes soon. It's too long. If we wait any longer, it's too long for those individual drivers. They can't make ends meet.
With the changes in the memorandum, Michael, I guess, how will communities of color benefit in your view?
Well, I think it's really about making sure that it's the least restrictive opportunity for people to get access to these jobs. So I think, I've been in many hats that I wear in constant contact with the Baker administration. I think that once they get this, they understand what this means and hopefully understand what it means for communities of color, they'll open it up and expand access and make sure it's not restrictive for our communities.
Tom, how will Uber be moving forward to, help drivers, until the rules are changed?
We're hopeful the rules get changed immediately, and the time is now. So we will keep speaking on behalf of the drivers on the community groups that are speaking up, and we'll keep requesting that the Governor Baker and his administration listen. This is the time they can change the memorandum. They can move that period up. The public comment period is now over, so it's time to make those rules happen.
Where do you draw the line, both of you, on this? I mean, there's a line, obviously safety is a concern, but you also want to be fair to the drivers. Where do you draw that line? Maybe you don't want to go back to crimes 30 years ago, but where conceptually, what's the thinking on that?
That is a great question. Last year, the state legislature came out and said, hey, this is the policy. And they have made the legislative intent that there are certain rules. There's a 7-year look-back period for many of these crimes. The indefinite look-back period was not a part of their discussion, so that's where we sit.
And we don't have to start from scratch on this. There's the EEOC, which has published some guidance on this stuff. There's the City of Boston and what we do post-Corey reform in Massachusetts. We don't have to do something through this regulation that is barring people from these opportunities. We should look at whatever other people are doing in Massachusetts, within the city, across the country, and model that here.
Okay, and just to wrap things up, Tom, I guess, what are you hoping, what do you anticipate where we're going to be going? We're going to have some sort of resolution to all of this.
We hope in the next few weeks or even sooner that this is resolved, that indefinite look-back period is amended, that the quaff element is removed, or continuous without finding is removed, and that the appeals process is made more robust.
Okay, all right. Tom Maguire, Michael Curry, thanks for coming in, and we'll see where it all goes.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well, in just a few minutes, information on the new commuter rail station coming to Blue Hill Ave in Mattapan. The details right here on Urban Update. We'll be right back.